Welcome to this week's edition of the Pete Mezzetti Show. I'm Pete Mezzetti. It's actually public access night tonight on the Pete Mezzetti Show. And with me to discuss what's going on with public access in the state of Connecticut is Chuck Lewis, who's the Executive Director for Valley Shore Community Television. Hi, Chuck.
Thank you, Peter, for having me on tonight.
Welcome.
Nice to be here.
And we also have Joni from Nutmeg TV on via Zoom. Joni, welcome. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming down. So, Joni, tell us a little bit about yourself and the history of Nutmeg Television.
Oh, my goodness. I didn't know I'd be talking about that, Pete, but
That's okay.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome.
I've been in PEG Access since 1994.
Okay.
And I didn't start as the executive director. I started doing public relations and community outreach. Prior to that, had worked at the Aetna for 16 years and had a lot of corporate experience. And so I was able to bring that to Nutmeg TV. And when our executive director left to go on to other things, I applied for that job, and I've been doing that since 2005. Nutmeg TV is a regional facility, very much like what you have there, and we handle 8 cities and towns, about 234,000 residents in central Connecticut.
And Chuck, tell us a little bit about yourself and your city, your station.
Thanks, Pete. I've been in the television business for about almost 40 years. I started doing commercial video production work, a small company just outside the campus of Yale in New Haven for many years, and then went into, did some work for the Weather Channel. I was producing a series of educational programming for the Weather Channel down in Atlanta, Georgia, which we all know and love when we see weather events happening in the country. And from there I went to education, working for the Manchester public school system, and I was a liaison. We were doing a lot of distance learning type television with Cox Communication, was the service there in that area. And then from there I went into, started working with the folks from Fox and started this Fox Student Television News program, which became a statewide opportunity for young high schoolers to produce local news stories. And from there I went to Region 17 schools and spent 20 years there teaching broadcast journalism and television and film production. So, and then that brought me, as I was closing in on retirement, I saw a cable access opportunity, which was formerly run by Comcast out of Clinton, Connecticut, and petitioned the state and Comcast to turn this into a regional nonprofit. And here I am 11 and a half years later, enjoying retirement, but also as an executive director of Valley Shore Community Television, which serves 9 towns in the Valley Shore community area. And we're producing a whole lot of content. We're busier than ever, and we're very happy that to be part of have Pete Mezzetti part of the family of local programming.
Thank you. Hey, Joni and Chuck, now this is a question for both of you. Let's explain. I understand there's a statewide blackout going on. Let's explain it.
In simple terms, together, both regional cable access providers and independent providers, we want to include all of them, decided that this was an opportunity to raise awareness about what it would look like if our airways went dark, to show the value that we bring to the community. We currently have a bill up in Hartford that's trying to extend and provide funding so that we can continue doing the work that we do in our communities. Real short story, and Joni's, she's the quarterback of this team, and I'll give it to her very shortly, but very succinctly is that we've got our funding mechanism, which has been known as a subscriber fee that comes from what we call our legacy customers, the last survivors of the folks in our state that are using cable television. Over the years, the last 5 years, there's been an acceleration of people, what they known as cutting the cord. Those are the people that are taking advantage of the internet and they're streaming select services to bring their television into their home. They no longer have cable. So as a result of that, we are losing the subscriber income, which is a very small fee that comes back to us to keep cable access alive in our communities. Joni, I'm going to pass the baton off to you so you can talk a little bit more about the blackout and make sure I fill in all the blanks.
Oh, thank you, Chuck. I I'm so happy that we've been able to partner together. You know, Pete, it's been a true David and Goliath for the last 5 years, trying to get this funding stabilized as it has been for so many years. And in order to do that, we had to partner together. And we chose to do that with other regionals across the state to have our voices be louder and be able to hire a lobbying group to be able to help us in Hartford, because it's a very involved and complicated issue when you're trying to get bills passed. But the blackout is a 2-week period of time where we're showing videos and giving stories about what public access is and what's going to happen if it's gone. Because, you know, you don't miss it till it's gone, right? And
Exactly.
that's what's going to happen in Connecticut.
And I understand we have a video that we're going to show right now. So guys, if you want to roll that video, please.
Public Education and Government Access TV, or PEG, has continued to serve Connecticut for over 30 years, connecting communities with local information, entertainment, education, and a transparent source for local government meetings. During this time, we've earned the trust of our communities. We're different than commercial media. Public access stations are not a network. They are publicly funded organizations that serve each of the 169 cities and towns. While some stations are operated by cable companies, almost half of the stations in Connecticut are managed by local nonprofit stations, like the one in your community. In fact, PEG stations are some of the last independently owned and operated TV stations in the country. Large and small, rural and urban PEG stations reach both cable and internet customers in Connecticut each year, with hyper-local content that educates, informs, and inspires, and that reach extends beyond the screen. Local stations are active members in the community, working with families and educators to prepare children for future success, bringing attention to state and local issues, and playing a role in healthcare and veterans affairs. At PEG, we view our audience as residents, not as consumers. We deliver award-winning, local community programming, such as documentaries, science, history, sports, cooking, and arts to our audiences, when, where, and how they want to watch. Since PEG's founding, federal support and state funding legislation has always been the cornerstone of what makes this possible. A fee is assessed to cable companies on each customer as they use public rights-of-way to reach billable customers. This fee is passed on to fund PEG. Every year, PURA reviews PEG funding, performance, and community engagement. Each station has a unique budget that includes legislatively mandated funding, individual donations, as well as revenue from other fundraising and grant sources, fulfilling the vision for a public-private partnership. But no matter how much fundraising for stations in rural or underserved communities, funding dollars can represent more than half of their budget, and without it, they won't survive. And communities across Connecticut will lose access to this essential service. PEG stations are making a difference, strengthening communities, improving lives, and serving all residents in Connecticut.
And welcome back, Chuck and Journey. We actually just saw a short video on PEG. Can we maybe talk about what we just saw?
Yes. You know, let's say that Pete Mezzetti wanted to have his own cable company. In Connecticut, it would require $1,000 and an application, and you could then start to use our public streets as an infrastructure in order to bring your wires down the street and connect to billable customers.
Right.
And the only obligation that you would have as a cable company is to pay 5% gross earnings tax to the state.
Right.
You'd have to fund a grant program called PEG-PISA, which is for schools and other nonprofits to be able to apply to.
Okay.
And you would have to fund PEG access. That would be the only obligations that you would have. I believe you also have to carry the broadcast stations.
Okay.
Now, the deal that you make for that is to take care of all those things. And Connecticut says to you, you know what? You don't have to pay any taxes on any of your personal property.
Okay.
So all of your trucks, your wires, any of your cable equipment, you don't have to pay any tax on. And you can use our streets in perpetuity, ongoing, with no review process. And so that's the deal that was struck in 2007.
Okay.
And that's a deal that has been around, the tax exemption's been around even longer than that. And now these companies are shirking that responsibility because their delivery has changed. They still use the same street, they still use the same wire, they still connect to the same customer, but it's a different delivery method. And so they're using a loophole in the law and kind of skating underneath that. And as a result, we're losing our funding. And so if we no longer have our funding, then those stations will go dark.
Right. Now, in simple terms, please explain the bill.
It's,
Well-
go ahead, Joni.
HB 5446
Yeah.
is a heavy lift, and it was designed that way because the broad spectrum of what needs to happen in Connecticut and what's happening and trying to be happening in other states is to level the playing field, have a bit more of a balance. But there is a lighter lift amendment out, and that's the one that I want to discuss.
Sure.
And the lighter lift amendment is just simply clarifying the existing law that any customer of a certificate holder for either cable or video, and those companies would only be Cox, Comcast, Altice, Breezeline, and who am I leaving out? Cable, Charter. Not Netflix and Hulu. There's a lot of rumors going around that's being stirred up by the opposition that this is the Major League Baseball and this is Hulu and Netflix, and none of that is accurate. These are only companies who have physical infrastructure on our streets, and any customer of those companies would pay the fee to fund PEG.
Okay. Now, obviously, what does the bill mean for public access? I know we talked about it a little bit during the opening, but can we explain it a little bit more?
Yeah, what the bill would mean would be to clarify in crystal clear terms what the companies are supposed to be doing, what
All
they
right.
agreed to, right? They made a deal, and now they're skirting underneath that deal. And so this would make it crystal clear that you must pay if you want to use our public streets.
Right.
And you want to use them to profit, then you have to pay. It's like if I had a sandwich shop in the local plaza and you had a shoe store next door to me and I had to pay rent and you didn't, that's not a fair playing field. And
No,
that's what's
absolutely not.
happening right now. And so this bill would certainly take care of balancing it. And I want to add before I turn it over to Chuck here that
Sure.
we applaud the companies and the technology. Isn't it wonderful to watch what you want, when you want, how you want? The problem is everyone must pay their fair share.
Right.
And so, we believe in capitalism and make all the money you want, but pay your fair share. And if you're using public rights of way, obviously, there have to be public benefit fees that are associated.
Right. Chuck, do you have something you'd like to
So
add?
I had one of our volunteers stop me just recently, and I share this story. I shared this story with legislators when we testified a month or so ago, that this person owns a local business in town.
Okay.
And pays rent, and they also pay personal property tax on
Sure.
that. So to Joni's point, it would be like, why would one business in town that's paying their fair way and paying rent to do business, why are we giving rent-free access to these companies who are collecting and making billions of dollars, by the way, billions of dollars,
Right.
And to have, you know, a rent-free access to a cable that comes into our homes? Nothing's changed at all. It's the same cable that's been coming into our homes using the same rights of way. That part hasn't changed. One thing that has changed, though, is cable access providers like ourselves. We've evolved. Even though the funding mechanism hasn't evolved, we all have evolved. We have state-of-the-art facilities. We produce more content now than we've ever done. Our communities rely on us for producing local content,
Right.
in a variety of different ways. We bring stories to our community, about our community and things going on in our community that people would never be aware of. We're one of the last local providers of content that exists, as many papers in our local communities no longer exist.
Right.
But the other way we've evolved is that we all have a digital presence. We aren't just limited to the cable subscribers anymore. We have a strong digital presence, so people are taking advantage of that digital presence through that same cable that's coming into the living room. Through the same cable that delivered the cable to their home. As Joni said earlier, they're just flying under the radar now and skirting what they agreed to originally and to provide community access. Now, this isn't one thing that I want to make clear. This isn't just a Connecticut issue. This is actually a nationwide issue.
Really?
And our neighbors to the north, in fact, Maine, recently they just passed legislation that's going to keep their community access providers alive.
Wow.
Why Connecticut, being has some of the best institutions, some of the greatest brain trust in the country, why are they going to let this wonderful digital media town green disappear from our communities?
Right.
We talk about how important it is to provide the resources to our communities, to keep them informed. Many of the legislators, in fact, many of them have been guests on your shows.
Yes.
I would like just one moment to talk a little bit about, just real briefly, the
Sure.
type of programming that we're bringing to our community, why it's so important to them.
Please.
We recently did a show called Little Compassion. It's a water lantern celebration. It's a nonprofit in Deep River, Connecticut, that builds a safe and inclusive community for all, regardless of their neurodiversity. And basically, it provides an umbrella of compassion, and it brings these folks together. So we did a story on this. Not only did we, raise awareness, but the community, many people in our community were unaware that this service was available to some of our residents. Common Good Gardens last year, we did a piece on growing food for people in need. They raised hundreds and hundreds of pounds of local vegetables for our local food kitchens. We did a story last year on another small operation called the Free Treasure Den. It's located in Old Saybrook, Connecticut. It's a mission to provide slightly used and new clothing for all ages, including household goods, hygiene products, baby furniture, and so much more. We brought that story to our community, and they responded back to us saying that they had a flood of new people taking advantage of these services. They would never have heard that without that content coming from our community. Right. So that's just a small example of some of the things that we've done. I had the pleasure, and you've had them on as guests for many years, for 20 years of hosting and a wonderful holiday show that we are grandfathered, and we provided a telethon that's normally not allowed on cable access, but we were grandfathered under the laws, and Comcast signed off on it many, many years ago. We raised over $600,000 for local nonprofits in our region. During my tenure at that time. Not only did we raise funding, but we also raised awareness by producing dozens and dozens of videos for these operations. And they were all local nonprofits that were giving back to our community. So it just, it bothers me when I hear about people challenging our relevance and not wanting to support cable access, because we do so much more than that appears to the average person. They said, the cliche that we keep hearing is, we got YouTube TV. I want to throw that back at those naysayers and say, well, does YouTube TV provide a studio of this magnitude? Do they provide a 5-camera remote package live production to broadcast local graduations? And just a small example, the local debates that we broadcast live to our community. YouTube TV is a conduit and a vehicle for airing that, but they aren't producing that content that's so important to it. Joni, I know you probably can offer a little bit from your end of the same kind of stories.
Yes, absolutely. And it's wonderful to hear what you're doing down there. And we share this content sister station to sister station, right? So the Pete Mezzetti Show, for example, the things that you talk about, Pete, we bring up here to our area and we air them here. And we do the same. There's content here that we can share to your community. We like to do that. But let's not forget something.
What's that?
These companies have the obligation that as long as they're using our public streets, our telephone poles, and the wires that run to customers, their one and only obligation is PEG access. And so the fact that they're trying to skirt it is bad enough. I mean, if you ask anybody in Connecticut what they think about their cable, they're going to have stories to tell you. We used to partner with these companies years ago, and it was wonderful collaborations. So we are here, we are relevant. It was proven in a study that Pura did, which was a wonderful way to showcase our relevancy. However, until they're doing something with satellite and they're not using our public streets and highways, they have a responsibility to pay the landlord. And Connecticut has lost $35 million on the low side in gross earnings tax. And those taxes go to fund a lot of very important public benefits in our communities. And the tax exemption for those municipalities who are out there listening, many of the assessors aren't even aware that this tax exemption exists. And there are millions of dollars that are being denied to our cities and towns because these companies are getting this exemption. And we're the only state in the country still allowing that.
Wow. Question for both of you. How important is public access to you? Joni?
Well, I'll tell you, when you recognize that in 1984, when the Cable Act was put into place, the reason that it was put there was as a platform for the public to be on the system, to be on the channels, and it's very different than holding up a cell phone, right? I wouldn't know how this interview would go right now, Pete, if you were holding up a cell phone and we were conducting it. These are public platforms that anyone can go at no charge and produce content that's important to them and their communities. And you know, Chuck, we're all very hyper-local. So what's happening in Farmington, maybe at a budget meeting, is going to be different than what's happening in Essex. And so these are hyper-local platforms. We use them as training opportunities also to help folks get jobs in the TV industry, which are very hard. Chuck, would you speak on that for a minute? Because you've got a couple of success stories.
Yeah, to that point, one of the greatest tools that I had in my toolbox as an educator was a cable access studio, and the equipment that was available to me. I have had some wonderful success stories. One of the greatest gifts of the noble profession as being an educator, it may not be a high-paying profession, but it's certainly a noble profession, is hearing back from past students and telling me what they're up to. Just a couple quick stories. Most recently, heard from a young lady who's a producer for a very popular Apple TV Emmy-winning award show, Ted Lasso.
Okay.
A former student of mine who started in my cable access studio up at Region 17, which is the educational access at Haddam-Killingworth High School. Also have two wonderful reporters working at CNN. Washington correspondent Jessica Schneider was a former student of mine, doing wonderful things as a reporter. Started also in a cable access studio doing a local news show in Manchester, Connecticut. And then I have another young man named Will Ripley, who's the Asian correspondent for CNN. Also, his roots and started here in a cable access. So just so many. And I have another young man just recently landed a job here in Connecticut, Channel 30 WVIT. We're hoping to get him to do a story on this very soon.
And I
Mr.
know
Geis.
who you're I know who you're talking about.
Kevin Geis.
I do.
He spent a lot of time in this particular studio. He was out doing a lot of sports stories for us. And so, yeah, so many wonderful stories. To Joni's point, that it's a training ground. And, you know, the workforce partners, it's so important that we're still educating our youth. And education is so important to not only the youth, too. I have two wonderful volunteers sharing their story with me. They're also former retired teachers, educators. They're behind the cameras tonight.
Yes,
and we're so grateful for those volunteers, but they've found
Absolutely.
something that they love and do. The first thing they said to me was, we love doing this. And
Yes.
you know, that's so important too. And that goes on at every single Access studio across the state, not just here, but every Access studio. So,
All right, last question for both of you. How can people support the bill?
it's important to that effect that we write our local legislators.
Okay.
We also, we have a sign the petition, and I think we can bring that QR code up in also the webpage. If you
Yeah.
have your phones, you can shoot that right now, and it'll bring you right to that webpage. If you put your phone in photo mode,
Yeah.
it'll bring you that QR code will bring you to the website where you can sign the petition. More and more people are signing that petition. We're getting a lot of traction in the last few weeks. We're in the final 2 weeks of this session. It's more important than ever that we really make every effort. And legislators and also Governor Lamont, he needs to hear from constituents as well across the state. Joni, you have any other suggestions what they can do, our viewers that are watching this?
I do. It's very important to stand up for free speech, and this is the platform for free speech. As we see some of the other mediums go away, newspapers, etc., it's very, very important. So please sign the petition, and if you go to the website, which is digitalequityconnecticut.com, there's a one-button link that if you hit that button, it goes to every legislator in Connecticut, as well as Governor Lamont and Lieutenant Governor Bicewicz. And there's a pre-filled form letter that's there. You can choose to change it if you'd like, or you can use the one that's right there. And I will tell you that we are up to about 1,000 signatures in a very short period of time, which is going to speak volumes. We also have a mail bag that will be hand-delivered to the governor with all the letters from people in Connecticut saying, don't shut the show on PEG access in Connecticut. Connecticut cannot be the first state in New England that shuts the lights off. As we see our sister states, Vermont, Maine, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New York, and New Jersey, all doing what they can to support PEG. And I know states have fiscal budgets, and I know things are tight, and there's a lot of people with their hand out, which is why we need to hold the feet to the fire of these cable companies, as long as they're using our streets, they have to pay their fair share. And
Chuck,
Pete, I want to thank you so much for everything that you've done.
Yeah,
I
thank
understand that you almost have 600 shows.
I believe it's over 600. And Joni, I actually want to thank you and Nutmeg for actually airing my show.
Oh, we're delighted to do so, and that's what makes the state what it is. So keep doing what you're doing.
You got it. Thanks, Joni. Thanks for coming on tonight. On behalf of, thanks, Chuck.
Thank you. You're very welcome,
You
Peter.
got it.
Thank you for all you do.
You got it.
Appreciate you.
Thank you for everything. On behalf of Chuck and Joni, I'm Pete Mezzetti. Thanks, good night, and we'll see you next week.